What is up, everyone? Thank you so much for checking out my ranking of the Rambo films. I am a huge fan of Sylvester Stallone, not just his performances in his movies and the characters, but the human being outside of all the action movies he's made and stuff. And I could not wait to do this video because I'm a huge Rambo fan. And there's 5 films in this franchise, and I do know that they are getting ready to do a prequel, which I'm very excited about. But today, what I'm going to do is rank all 5. I will say that I do enjoy pretty much every film in this franchise, but if I have to actually put them in order, I've been working on that because I went back to rewatch all the films and just to see which ones I feel is just a little bit better than the others. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. All right, coming in at number 5 is Rambo 3. I wouldn't necessarily say that this is a bad movie, but I just feel like this one doesn't really capture a lot of the excitement as the other Rambo films. And this film actually drags in a lot of spots to me. And I don't know if Stallone wrote and directed this, but I just feel like the story was a little lackluster than the other ones. So in this film, the Afghanistan war is going against Russia, and Colonel Troutman is going to be going in, and he is wanting Rambo to kind of team up with him to get the mission done. And that's one thing that I always looked forward to, was to be able to see Colonel Troutman and Rambo work together. And I feel like with that, this film really could have stood out, but it just it didn't deliver on that note, in my opinion. Rambo is in Thailand again, and when he turns down Troutman's request to join him, Colonel Troutman goes in by himself and ends up getting captured. Well, now it's time for Rambo to go save, his friend. And to me, it's just the fact that Rambo's literally going into Afghanistan, and is going to take out this army by himself. And like I said, to me, I feel like this film was rushed. There's a scene where he gets to the village and they're doing the local sport where they're riding horses and they're carrying a dead carcass with them. And I don't really understand all of the rules, but they kind of taunt Rambo into joining the game, and he does, and he ends up showing that he's actually pretty good. But that's one of the scenes that I just feel drags, and you're just like, come on, like it really didn't bring anything to the story, in my opinion. And so once we actually do get into the action, I will say I think it's pretty good. I know when Rambo goes to rescue Colonel Troutman the first time and he doesn't succeed the first time, I do like the gunplay and the action that goes on. And then to me, one of the coolest things in any of the Rambo films is in this actual scene, is where he stays behind in the cave and he looks down and he has a metal, like it speared his side, and Rambo cleans it with gunpowder and he lights it, and it was a good practical effect. I thought that for back in this day, it still looks great today. But I thought that was really cool to show how tough Rambo is. And the final fight, when he does finally save Colonel Troutman, and it's like this big, huge hole that they fight in. It shows Rambo fighting with this huge villain. And I like the fact that it looks like Rambo's about to get done in, and then all of a sudden Rambo wraps the rope around him and takes their grenades and throws the big guy down the hole. And as the guy's falling to get hung, pretty much, all of a sudden grenades go off, boom, and kills the bad guy. But overall, when I do watch this franchise, there's sometimes I'm in the mood to watch it, and there's other times that I'll actually skip this one because, like I said, I feel like it does drag. I find myself fast forwarding it to the good parts. But anyway, that's my opinion, and that's why this is coming in at number 5. So coming in at number 4 is Rambo Last Blood. And in this film, we find out that Rambo is living on his father's ranch in Arizona, where he shares the ranch with Maria and her granddaughter Gabrielle. And pretty much Rambo is retired now from any active duty, and he's raising horses, I guess, or training horses on this farm. But he's looking out for Marie and Gabrielle. They're friends of the family. But we find out that Rambo is still suffering, and from, I can't think what it's called, but flashbacks and memories of Vietnam and his time in war. And he digged these tunnels under the entire ranch. It's kind of like, I'm going to say, to get his mind off things, and he's doing it for shelter and, just in case something ever was to happen. But in this film, Gabrielle wants to find her real father, and she's got a friend that lives in Mexico, Giselle, and she ends up telling her, "Hey, I found your dad." And she goes wanting to talk to her father, which is Miguel. And Rambo and Marie are like, "This is not a good idea. He didn't want you. He wasn't even there for you. Why would you even waste your time?" But understandably, she is wanting to at least meet him. And, I do kind of get that. But, Rambo's telling her there's nothing for her down there in Mexico, and that, you know, pretty much he didn't want her to begin with. But like a lot of teenagers, she doesn't listen, so she ends up going down and meeting up with Giselle in Mexico, and she does finally get to meet her real biological father, Miguel, and he pretty much just is a piece of trash and tells her, he never wanted her or her mother. Well, while she's upset, Giselle takes her to a nightclub, and that's where Gabrielle ends up getting drugged and gets taken into sex trafficking. And it's pretty much the cartel is run by Victor Martinez and his brother Hugo Martinez. Well, when Marie finds out that Gabrielle is not um, coming home because Giselle said that she's been missing, then Rambo ends up going down to Mexico and taking care of business. And I love the scene where Rambo finds Miguel's house and just the tension that builds up because, Rambo just tells him, I should have snapped your neck back in the day. But then Rambo ends up finding Giselle, and this is another great scene where Rambo's trying to figure out where Gabrielle's last steps were. He's pretty much tracking to find out who took her, where she was seen last. And as he's talking to Giselle, Giselle's like, "Well, she got hammered. She went out with this guy and all this stuff." Well, he looks down and he sees that Giselle is wearing Gabrielle's bracelet that her mother gave her. And he's like, why do you have that bracelet? And she's like, "She gave it to me." And he's like, "She didn't give that to you. That was her mother. She never would have gave it up." And Giselle tries to start running her mouth, and all of a sudden Rambo just grabs that knife and slams it on the table in front of her. And just the music and the tension in that scene is really good. And he's like, "You sold her out." And he makes her go to the nightclub that she took her to, and they do end up finding the guy that drugged Gabrielle. Rambo interrogates him, pretty much just freaking hits him as hard as he can with the knife right here. Dude grabs his, I guess that's his collarbone, and is just torching the guy and makes him take him to where the cartels are at. And I remember watching it for the first time in theaters when Rambo confronts the cartel, and Victor's up there and Hugo, and they're all surrounding him. And he shows a picture of Gabrielle, and they just tend to beat the snot out of him. I mean, beat him down. Victor even cuts a V into Rambo's cheek, and Hugo, I believe, is the one that makes a statement about, "Now, for you coming here, we're going to punish Gabrielle." And they just leave him there for dead. But I just feel like this film deals really well as far as, I guess you would say, the cartel situation. I think it deals with, you know, Rambo's pretty much like, I would say, her uncle, and it deals with that family aspect of nobody's going to screw around with, his family, and he's lost so much, and he's not going to lose her. Well, he does end up, after he gets healed and everything. There's a woman on there named Carmen, I believe is her name. She ends up rescuing Rambo and taking him back to her house, and you find out that her daughter went missing as well back, I guess it was a couple years ago. So she's been kind of following what's going on. But um, when Rambo goes to the brothel where they keep the women, that is such a violent scene. I mean, he's hitting people with hammers, and he's telling the girls to get out. Like every girl is there, but they won't do it because they said if we run, they'll kill us. So he does end up eventually finding Gabrielle, and she's so out of it, she's drugged up, and he takes her, puts her in the truck, and they're heading back to Arizona. And this was one of the scenes that really shocked me because when I was in the theaters watching it, this is one of the first times you really see Rambo caring that much for somebody. And he's trying to tell her, it's not your fault, and she's blaming herself for it and everything. And I did not think she was going to end up dying. And when she dies, that just threw me for a loop. And the sad part is when he rides back into town in his truck, and there's Marie coming out, and he gets out and he's got to tell her that Gabrielle's gone. It's that's the saddest moment. And they ended up burying her in the backyard under a tree, and Marie ends up leaving. She goes to stay with family, and she makes a comment that really sticks with you. She says, "I'll never be happy again," or it's something like that, or she says, "I'll be sad till I die," or something. But I think it's, "I'll never be happy again." But Rambo, being Rambo, goes back to Mexico and finds where Victor's at and takes all of his guys out and ends up killing Victor. You can hear him in the shower. I wish they would have showed that though. But they come in, they find Victor's body. Hugo does. He walks in because all the cartel's there, and Victor's head is missing, but his head is cut off, and right in the middle is a knife through Gabrielle's photo. And then it cuts to Rambo driving down the road, and he just drops Victor's head. And it just starts rolling. But so now Hugo gets everybody together, the cartel, to come and get Rambo. They know where he's at. And Rambo, it's almost like the rated R Home Alone. He's setting all the traps up, getting ready. And I love that he's at Gabrielle's um, grave, and he's just kind of sitting there looking at it, and he can hear the cartel coming, and it's go time. The music hits, and he's got all the under the tunnels set up to explode. He's got just everything you can think of. Like I said, he's this is what you come to see when you watch a Rambo film, is how Rambo's going to take everybody out. And it's just a great finale, a great scene where he's just one by one taking them out. And I mean, using machetes, he's got sawed off shotguns. And when he shoots people, it's like setting them on fire. It's just good, but he's deliberately waiting on Hugo. There's a couple times where he could have took Hugo out and he doesn't. But I like the fact that he does tell Hugo, he goes, uh, I'm I'm going to rip your heart out like you ripped mine out when he went since Gabrielle passed. And the one thing in this movie that I'm always waiting on, especially in the Rambo film, is where's the bow and arrow? The bow and arrow. Well, finally, it's just down to him and Hugo, and Rambo tells him, he's like, "Hey, if you want to live, follow the lights." And he just starts exploding the entire yard, the entire ranch. And Hugo makes it out, and he's in this barn. And I love how he's walking, and Hugo's kind of looking around, and all of a sudden Rambo comes out of nowhere and just starts firing the arrows, and he sticks them in both shoulders and in the legs where he can't move. So now he's pinned to the wall. And Rambo comes out, and still only Stallone does this. I've noticed this. He does it almost in every movie. Stallone's walking, and he always does his shoulder shrug. You see him unlatch his big knife, and he pulls the knife out, and he just looks at Hugo, and he goes, "This is what it feels like," and just right there in the chest, and just starts carving down, goes to the right, and just pulls his heart out. And I wouldn't expect that. I didn't think he was actually going to do that. And then, of course, we get where after all the chaos is gone, Rambo's just sitting there, and I really thought he was going to pass away. I thought they were going to kill the Rambo character, but he's sitting in a rocking chair just looking out. And then the next thing you know, he gets on his horse, and he's gone. It just shows him riding off in the sunset. Now, going through that entire movie, like I said, I enjoy this movie. I really do. But the reason it's coming in at number 4 is because, to me, it didn't really feel like a Rambo film until the finale. And I know Stallone was in his 70s, I believe, when he filmed this. And, maybe he didn't want to grow his hair out, but Rambo's always had the longer hair. To me, this just looked like Sylvester Stallone could have been any Sylvester Stallone movie. Just change the name and it could have been just a regular action movie. The only time it felt like Rambo was toward the end and the finale. But I still enjoy the movie. But like I said, I just feel like sometimes it was just missing some similarities to the other franchise. But overall, it is a really good film. But that's why it's coming in at number 4. So coming in at number 3 is Rambo: First Blood Part 2. This is where the struggle was for me to figure out where I wanted to put this one, because I really love this film because we finally get to see what John Rambo is capable of doing out in the jungle with the military backing him up. I know we got to see what he could do out in the woods in the first film, but this one, you finally get to see how he got his reputation. So what we find out in this is that Rambo was still in prison because of what happened in the first film. And Colonel Troutman comes to see him, and he's letting him know, hey, I'm trying to get you out, so I have a mission. So he's got two options. He can either stay in prison, or he can go and do this job for the military and go back over to Vietnam, because they do believe that there's American POWs still being captured over there and being tortured. So if Rambo accepts it, he will be reenlisted in the army and he will get a presidential pardon. So of course Rambo does take it, and he ends up meeting up with the guy Murdoch and Erickson. Murdoch is head over the unit or the station that they're going to. And pretty much they just tell Rambo, you go in, take photographs. We're trying to set people's mind at ease, the American people, that there is no POWs missing, and none of them are still over there. And he tells them, do not engage no matter what. And pretty much he knows that whatever Rambo finds, he's not going to let the American people know. So we finally get to see Rambo going into Vietnam, and of course he ends up meeting up with another. I can't remember if she's like civilian or if she's like the guide of what's going on over there in Vietnam, but her name is Cobal, I think Cobal or Kobo, maybe it's Kobo, I don't remember. But anyway, he ends up meeting up with her, which I think them two played off very well with each other. I actually would that we could have seen them two end up together, but she ends up taking him to where the POWs are supposedly supposed to be, and she knows he's not supposed to engage with the enemy, just to take pictures. And of course, Rambo being Rambo, he's not going to leave anybody behind. So he actually does end up rescuing one of them that's being hung up and being tortured. And I remember watching this, and the scene where Rambo is got this guy, and I think his name is Banks, and they're trying to get to the helicopter the next day because they're supposed to be coming back to pick up Rambo. Well, when they're going through this rice field, and the enemies are shooting at Rambo and at Banks, and right when they get up to the helicopter, they're like, Colonel Troutman's like, there's Rambo. And all of a sudden, when Murdoch finds out that he actually has a POW with him, he tells him to abort the mission, tells Erickson to abort the mission. And that scene where the helicopter just turns around and Rambo looks up and just throws his arms up because he realizes they just left him. Man, that scene gets me every time. It's like, you son of a gun. And Troutman is not happy at all. But they end up capturing Rambo because, of course, he's just got one gun and there's a whole team unit, capturing him. And they go put him in some nasty looking water with leeches and everything. And now I think it's the Soviets. Yeah, Soviet troops, now they're coming in. So now it's not just the Vietnam people, but now the Soviets are there, and they're torturing Rambo. They want Rambo to talk. Rambo is just not saying a word at all. And they end up taking Rambo's knife and they put it in these hot coals and they go to cut Rambo here. And Rambo still won't say a word. And they got like this electric thing built on this bed frame. And they've got Rambo tied up. And this big, huge Soviet guy keeps cranking it up to electrocute him. And finally, they pull in Banks. And they're like, well, if you're not going to talk and you don't care to get tortured, maybe you'll talk if we cut his eye out. And Banks tells him not to do it, but he finally says yes. He finally agrees. Rambo does. And this is my favorite scene of the entire movie. They sit him down in front of the radio. He calls in, and Colonel Troutman grabs it, and he's like, Rambo, we're here, Rambo. And he's like, and all he does is ask for Murdoch. And Murdoch just kind of looks over because, Murdoch was dirty. He knows Rambo knows that he just up and left him. And I'll never forget, he just says, tell us where you're at. We'll come get you, Rambo. He's trying to play it off. And Rambo just leans down and he grabs that mic. He goes, Murdoch. And he just crunches the thing. He's holding the neck of that microphone radio. And he goes, I'm coming for you. Lightning strikes. And man, he picks that thing up, just starts hammering everybody. And I like that. I'm going to say, I hope I'm not messing her name up. Cobal, whatever. I love that she was underneath the actual building and she starts shooting upwards. So she's shooting through the floor and she's actually rescuing Rambo and Banks. So I like that them two work really well together. And unfortunately, you know, him and her are talking. She's kind of helping stitch him up, and he tells her that, he's expendable. He told her that earlier in the movie. Well, in this scene, she tells him, she says, "You're not expendable." And man, they just played off each other so well. I wish they would have stayed together. And then once they finally start making their way, of course, she gets shot, and she ends up dying, and that's it for Rambo. And Rambo she had this little charm, and he puts it on. It's a necklace, and he ends up burying her. And next thing you know, all hell breaks loose. Rambo's hiding. He covers himself from head to toe in mud, and he's just coming out of nowhere, and he's killing them left and right, killing everybody that's walking by. So finally, he does end up getting a helicopter. He finally goes and gets all of the POWs out. They get in the helicopter, and I love the fact that the leader, he's following them and he's shooting at them. And this big, huge scene is really good. It's just, Soviets are chasing Stallone or Rambo, and Rambo just destroyed the entire village. Well, it looks like Rambo got hit, his helicopter. And I love the fake out. Rambo's sitting there, and you see the Soviet helicopter coming around, and there's Rambo's helicopter just sitting on top of the water. And the Soviet leader can see Rambo, and he just kind of sloped over to the side, and he thinks, okay, I got him. And right before he's fixing to fire on Rambo and the POWs in the helicopter, Rambo comes out of nowhere and has a rocket launcher and just shoots it through the hole in the windshield and just destroys the helicopter, the Soviet Union. So that was a good fake out. I really love that scene. And of course, in this film, he's got the missiles that explode. And the guy they ended up shooting, Cobal, I love that he's getting up on this rock, and Stallone, Rambo pulls that arrow back. As soon as he lets it go, as soon as it hits the guy, boom, it just explodes him. So finally, Rambo does end up getting back to the base where Murdoch and Troutman is. And as soon as Rambo gets off the helicopter, here comes Erickson. I think he ends up kicking him, kneeing him in the nuts and hitting him with the butt of the gun. And then he just walks past Colonel Troutman, and Troutman's just watching him. And he goes in, and Rambo just starts shooting all the computers and everything. And he's just sitting there screaming while he's doing it. And Murdoch is flipping out. And then he finally sees Murdoch, and Murdoch's like trying to BS him. Murdoch's like, "Hey, I had to follow orders just like you, and my high chain of command made me do this." And all of a sudden, Stallone grabs him and slams him on the table and raises that knife up, and you think he's fixing to kill Murdoch. And he slams the knife down right next to Murdoch's head, and Rambo looks at him and goes, "There's more out there." He goes, "Find him." Like, it's such a good scene. But overall, Rambo: First Blood Part Two is a great film. It's a great action film, and yeah, this is one that every time I watch the franchise, I can't wait to get to this one because I really enjoy it. But yeah, that's coming in at number three. All right, down to the final two, and coming in at number two is Rambo. When Rambo come out in theaters, I was not expecting to have this much violence and this much action in this film. Um, in 2006, Stallone's acting career picked back up when he came out with Rocky Balboa. Well, then when like a year later after that film came out, they were in talks of filming a new Rambo, and I knew a lot of people were bashing like, "Oh, he's too old to play Rambo again." Well, this ended up turning out to be one of the best Rambo films, and that's one thing I like about Stallone is that he normally plays his age. He doesn't try to play a younger version of himself, and I think the casting was really good in this film. You have Julia Benz, who plays Sarah in this film. She is from Dexter. A lot, if you're a Dexter fan, a lot of people know her. But I like that. You know, all these years later, they kept the Rambo theme, and we find out that Rambo he hunts snakes and fish, and he gets these snakes for the Thailand people when they do like snake shows and stuff like that. But before the film even gets started, they show real footage of these attacks that happen in Burma. And Stallone wanted to make this aware that there's people being tortured over in Burma, and he wanted to make sure that people knew that this was real and that this has to stop. And that's one thing I've always respected about Stallone is the man does have compassion, and for them to use that real footage already. I mean, I remember being in theaters being like, "Oh my gosh, like they're really showing this stuff." So once we get into the film, and like I said, Rambo, you figure out what he's been doing. He's living in Thailand, and he has a boat that he goes out and fish and hunts with. Um, we end up meeting a group of Christian missionaries who are wanting to go to Burma to hand out Bibles and to help the villagers that are sick or that's hungry, that's hurt, you know. And I love that Michael, he's the leader of the group. He goes up to Rambo and he was like, "We want to know if we can rent your boat." And Rambo's like, "Where?" And he goes, "I want to go upriver." He goes, "Boat don't go upriver." He goes, "Well, I want to go to Burma." Michael says, we're trying to make change." And Rambo goes, "You bring any weapons?" And he goes, "No." He goes, "Then you're not changing anything." I love that. But Rambo knows how it really is. Rambo's pretty much just given up on civilian life after all the other films. And anyway, Sarah ends up going to talk to Rambo later that night, and she's telling him, "You know, I know you just haven't given up on everything. There's something you got to believe in. You got to believe in good." And there's a really good scene. They're in the rain talking, and it's a very good dialogue, very well written for Rambo and Sarah to be talking. Well, he finally agrees to do it for her, and you find out he didn't take any of the money, and he takes him up there. But one of the scenes that really sticks out to me is, you know, they're traveling by boat, and it's going to be a few hours. Well, they end up seeing these Burmese pirates on the side of the lake or river, and Stallone cuts down all the lights, and he's like, "Don't talk, don't say anything," and they're just kind of coasting by because that's their territory. And then all of a sudden, the lights click on. Here come the Burmese pirates, and that whole scene is very intense. And the entire time they're talking, Rambo is looking, and he's looking and counting the guns and seeing what he has to do, what he's going to have to do. And they ended up seeing Sarah, and they're like, "Bring her to me." And he's like, "Take whatever you want, but leave her alone." And some dialogue continues to go between them, and all of a sudden, Rambo pulls his pistol out and just pow, 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 and just gets them all down. And Michael cannot get over that he just killed him. And he was like, "We come here to change it." And all of a sudden, Stallone grabs him by the throat and slams him. Rambo slams him to the thing, and he goes, "Who are any of you?" He says, "You want?" They would have took advantage of her 50 times and then cut her head off. And that's what he's like, "We're going back." And Sarah says, "No, you know, what happened there is a tragedy, but we have to go visit these people." So he does it. You can really tell that Stallone or Rambo cares for Sarah. So he finally gets him to Burma, lets him off, and we see that the village that they're at, they're trying to make a difference. They're handing out these Bibles, they're handing out medical supplies and all this stuff, and all of a sudden the village gets attacked, and it is such a violent scene. We're seeing children getting killed, we're seeing beheadings, all this stuff. It's a very violent scene. It was violent enough that, like I said, I've seen a lot of horror films and stuff, and watching this movie, I'm just like, holy cow! I almost can't believe sometimes that it didn't get an X rating in the theater. Huge scene, and then eventually we find out that they've been captured, and Stallone gets visited. I don't know if he was part of um, the Christian group that the other group was a part of, or like maybe he was like one of the head pastors or something. But he comes and says that um, they've been missing for 10 days and nobody's heard from them, and they've got some missionaries that agree to go save them, but they don't know the route, they don't know where to go, so they ask Rambo to take them. That's one thing I really like about this film is it's not just Rambo going in and wiping everybody out. It's Rambo. He's older. He looks tougher, but he's older. He's wiser, and now he's got help with missionaries. I really enjoyed that. They've got Schoolboy. He's a sniper in the missionaries. He's great. I like him. I like he's just a down to earth guy. And then the leader of the missionaries is Lewis. He can be a prick, but he does eventually warm to you. To me, he did. And so they start heading to Burma. And I remember when they get to the village, and you see the just the chaos. They even killed the cows. It's just people's heads are on sticks, and all of a sudden, here comes the enemies with all these prisoners. Pretty much, you might as well say, and they take landmines and they're throwing them in the waters, and they're placing bets on who's going to make it and who's not. And they're making these people run across this little pond of water, and they make them come back and forth until I guess one of them just lives. And out of nowhere, Rambo finally comes with that bow and arrow and just starts getting every single one of them. The music's intense, and the missionaries had no idea that Rambo could even do this. They just thought he was a boat driver. But such a great scene. And then that's when I remember Lewis is like, "Who are you, boatman?" And he's like, "Let's move." And pretty much Rambo takes over, and Lewis is like, "No, we're not doing this. We're going back." And all of a sudden, Rambo pulls that arrow and puts the arrow right in front of his eyes, and he says the classic, "Live for nothing, die for something." Yeah, so really phenomenal scene. And the entire village where these Christian missionaries are at, it's raining, it's storming, and Rambo and the missionaries are going in and wiping everybody out to save these people. And Rambo does eventually save Sarah. She's fixing to have a guy have his way with her, and all of a sudden Rambo just comes up behind him and just bare hands puts his hand on his esophagus right there, just rips it open. Um, but overall, it's such a violent scene, and it's what they're doing to these women and making these young boys join the, I guess you would just say, the army, with the Burma army. It's just really upsetting. It's sad. And later on, when toward the finale, after Rambo sets off this huge bomb, we don't see Rambo for a little bit, and they end up, Sarah and Schoolboy are running up to a hill, and they're fixing to head down to where the boat is, and they end up seeing that all of the bad guys have all of whoever's left of the Christian missionary group, and all the missionaries are lined up, and they're just fixing to kill them. And all of a sudden, that scene where Rambo just comes up out of nowhere behind this guy and just cuts his head off and grabs this big old gun that's hooked to the truck and just starts firing. Then all hell breaks loose for this finale. Great finale. Love the scene. And of course, the main villain of the film is running uphill trying to get away. He's not getting shot. He's killing a couple of them, but he's able to get away. Rambo sees him. Rambo jumps off the back of the truck, has this huge, it's almost a homemade machete. All of a sudden, just bam, stabs him right in the stomach and just slices, and everything just starts falling out. Rambo just kicks him and just makes him roll down the hill. And you see all this chaos. The music starts building up, and it's such a great scene where Rambo is just on top of the hill and he's holding his shoulder and he's looking down at all this chaos. And all of these Christian missionaries and all of the other missionaries that are around, they just been through hell, and it really opens their eyes, especially the Christian missionaries, of what life is like over there. And overall, just a fantastic film. Uh, it's still to this day. I mean, this film came out in 2008, and it still holds up as far as a great action film. But it's also still hard to watch some of the scenes because of how violent it is. But I really enjoy this film, and I think it's one of Stallone's best performances, especially as Rambo. And the ending of it, when he looks down and he sees everybody looking up at him, like Sarah, and he turns around to walk off. I love how it fades off and it shows him back in his home state of Arizona, and you see the mailbox that says, I think it says R Rambo for his dad. He looks around, the music starts playing, and Rambo starts walking down to this big, long entrance to this ranch. If that's the way the Rambo franchise would have ended, I was perfectly happy because it all came full circle. But yeah, absolutely love this film. All right, and coming in at number one is First Blood. The film that started it all. I absolutely love this film. Written perfectly well. The characters were cast perfect. The score of this film, and they really were able to capture the emotions of what these soldiers back in the day went through when they came back to America. You know, they were being called some outlandish names and just being mistreated. But the film starts off with, we see Rambo going to a house, and he's smiling, he's happy, and he's going to meet up with one of his friends that he served with. And he goes down and he's asking about him, and I think it's his mother. She's hanging up clothes and she's like, he's dead. Rambo's like, what? She goes, yeah, died of cancer. And she says that Agent Orange, I think is what they call it. She said it just ate his body up. And man, you can just see Rambo's expression just go down so much that he was looking forward to seeing his buddy, and he has a picture of him and his buddy, and he just gives it to his mom. And Rambo just turns around, and man, just the way Stallone played that scene was phenomenal. I mean, he was just so upset, and he just walks off, and he finally ends up going to this small town called Hope, and it's in Washington State. And all he's doing is just going through this town, maybe stop and grab a bite to eat. Well, then this sheriff, his name is Will Tessel, ends up seeing Rambo, and he sees how Rambo looks. He's got the American flag. He's got the kind of the longer hair, and he wants to keep his town peace and quiet. He don't want no strangers, so he tells him to get in. And Rambo's like, "Is there a place that I can get something to eat around here?" And he was like, "There's a diner about 50 miles up the road." And he's like, "What's wrong with eating here?" And pretty much the sheriff just tells him flat out, "We don't want you here. We don't like strangers." And when he drops him off at the edge of town, he even tells him, he's like, "You may want to get a haircut and clean up." Goes to turn around and drives off, and then Rambo just ignores him and starts walking back. And when the sheriff sees him, he goes back, and Stallone's just completely ignoring Will talking to him, the sheriff. He's like, "Hey, where you going?" And Rambo's just walking, and all of a sudden when he goes to grab Rambo, and Rambo kind of just resists for a minute. Of course, he brings him to the sheriff's office to arrest him. But we get introduced to one of the biggest douchebags in this film, and that's Deputy Galt. I cannot stand him in this film. He played it very well to make you not like him. And then we also have, there's another guy named Mitch. He's a younger officer. But they end up taking Rambo in, booking him in. He is putting up a fight, and Deputy Galt is just a piece of trash, and he ends up just running his mouth to Rambo. He ends up hitting Rambo with the stick, and then they end up making him strip so they can wash them off for court Monday morning. And they see all the scars on them, and even Officer Mitch is like, "Man, what happened to this guy?" And they're going to give him a shave. Well, when they pull that razor out, Rambo starts having flashbacks of being tortured over in Vietnam, and just snaps and just starts going off and taking everybody out. And the fun fact, well, I guess it wasn't fun for the guy, but when Rambo hits the guy with a back elbow, he actually ended up breaking the guy's nose in real life. But anyway, so we see Rambo just take off. He gets out of the sheriff's office, he gets a dirt bike and just takes off down the road, and all hell breaks loose. Will, the sheriff, is chasing after him. Galt actually even tries to shoot Rambo in town, and the sheriff's like, "No, no, no, there's civilians out here." Big, huge chase scene, and finally Rambo gets up to the woods, and now they're on his playground, is the way I see it. And there's a scene in there that really, it's almost what would you do, where Rambo gets to the edge of this cliff and he has nowhere to go, and all of a sudden he can hear a helicopter, and here comes a helicopter, and Deputy Galt is setting out with a rifle, and he's trying to shoot at Rambo, and they're not even supposed to kill Rambo. They were wanting to bring him in alive. And you could tell that Officer Galt is a dirtbag, and I would almost say like almost a dirty cop, because even the helicopter guy's like, "We're not supposed to be shooting. What are you doing?" And he goes, "I'm gonna tell you right now." He goes, "If you don't steady this helicopter, I swear to God, I'm gonna kill you." I mean, it's like, golly. And Rambo has no choice. He's climbing down this mountain, and he looks at these trees and just jumps out. And I don't know if it's true or not, but I did hear that Stallone actually like broke a rib or two hitting some of the trees. But the helicopter's coming down, and Rambo grabs this big rock and chunks it at the helicopter, and ends up hitting the windshield, and it kind of jars back the pilot, and he loses control of the helicopter, and Officer Galt ends up falling out and landing on the rocks. And that's one thing that I really find interesting about this movie, is how violent the movie is as far as what's taking place, but really he's the only one that gets killed, is Officer Galt, and it wasn't even on purpose. Later on, they do find out that Rambo is a former elite soldier, a veteran of the U.S. Army Special Forces unit. And Officer Mitch is like, "Wow, a Green Beret," and all this stuff. Like, he's actually excited about it. The scene that really stands out to me is where Rambo is in the woods and he's setting all these traps, and one by one he takes these cops out, and it's just him and a knife. That's all he's doing. And he's got spikes going into their legs. He's making them shoot each other. And there's one scene where it's finally left to where it's just the sheriff, and Rambo comes out of nowhere and puts the knife up the sheriff's throat, and he was like, "I'll give you a war you wouldn't, you'll never believe." And he was like, "Don't push it, don't push it." And he just gets off and runs off, and sheriff actually realizes he was just about to get killed. He could have got killed that quick, and he just falls down and starts crying in his hands. I think that's a really good scene. And then now we finally end up getting introduced to Colonel Sam Troutman, and he's the one that trained Rambo, and he's very close to Rambo. And he's trying to tell him, "Hey, you need to leave him alone. Let everything die down. Let everything cool down, and let Rambo come out on his own." And the sheriff's like, "Nope, he ain't having it." And it's just funny because he finally looks at me. He's like, "Hey, if this is the way you want it, so be it." I'm just paraphrasing. But we have Rambo finally gets to talk to Troutman. And this is another scene where I feel like Stallone really shows his emotions, where Troutman is talking to him, and they're using the old school names that he used back in Vietnam. And Rambo gets under and he tells him, he was like, "All the other members of the unit are dead. I'm the only one left." And, he's trying to get Rambo to come and surrender, and Rambo just ain't having it. But I really enjoy the finale where Rambo goes back to the town, and he's not killing nobody, but he's just taking out buildings. He's loading up on ammo. And of course, the sheriff didn't take Troutman's warning serious. So now the sheriff is on top of the sheriff's station watching the police station, and Rambo knows he's up there. Well, Rambo gets in to the office and ends up shooting through the glass ceiling and knocks the sheriff down on the ground. And right before Rambo is going over there to finish him off and to kill him, Troutman stops him, tells him don't do it. And this right here is, I feel, one of Stallone's best performances. Is finally Troutman's telling him the war is over, and Rambo just starts flipping out, starts screaming at him, telling him nothing is over, nothing. Tells him about how when I've come back after doing my duty for America, I'm being called baby killer, and I was handling $1 million equipment, and here I can't even hold down a job parking cars. And man, Rambo just breaks down and talks about seeing his friend getting killed and seeing everything that was going on and nobody would help. Such an emotional scene. And Troutman goes over there and hugs him. And there's actually two endings to this. One ending, Troutman actually does kill Rambo, and then they reshot it. And this is the ending that we got, where finally he surrenders, and the music's playing and they're taking him off the jail. But overall, First Blood, I feel, is the best of this franchise because of how it was written, the cast of characters, the score, like I said, and just to this day, it still holds up. I think this film came out in 1980, and it's still a great film. And I don't think anything they ever do with any of the Rambo franchise will ever beat the first one. But overall, fantastic film, fantastic franchise. So, all right, that is my review of the Rambo franchise. I hope you guys and gals like this video. Please leave a like on this video and also subscribe, and please leave a comment and let me know what your ranking is of the Rambo franchise, from worst to best, or however you want to put it. And also, I do have some new videos coming out here very soon, and I just want to let everybody know, I know that I'm not able to post like a lot of the other content makers on YouTube, but I don't do this for money or nothing. I'm not getting paid to do this. I don't have the funds to go out to the theaters and to watch all these new movies. I know that I've had some people be like, man, you haven't put a video out in a while or something. With my job, me being on call so much, and just life in general, I don't do this for a living. I don't make any money off these videos. I do it because I love to discuss films. And I do know that, some people want to see me do newer movies, but I'm in a small town that don't even have a theater that shows a lot of the movies that I like to review. So, but as always, I just want to say God bless each and every one of you, and I will see you next time.
Live for nothing or die for something.